This man owns the Weather Channel. He just took over Stephen Colbert's time slot on CBS, which is the most famous hour in late-night television. Then a week later, he bought BuzzFeed and made himself the CEO. And here's the wild part. He has bid more than $40 billion trying to buy Paramount, ABC, BET, and an entire NFL team, and lost basically every single one of those fights. This is Byron Allen, and he started out as a 14-year-old kid telling jokes. Let's get into his massive media empire. Chapter 1. The man who took Colbert's time slot. Let's start with the most audacious thing that's happened in television recently, because it tells you exactly how Byron Allen operates. In July of 2025, CBS announced it was canceling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, ending a franchise that had run since 1993 when David Letterman first jumped from NBC. The network called it purely a financial decision, saying the show was losing tens of millions of dollars. Now, that 11:35 time slot, right after the local news, is the single most prestigious piece of real estate in late-night television. Letterman had it. Colbert had it. And when the news broke that it was opening up, Byron Allen didn't wait to be asked. He publicly raised his hand. At an advertising event, he said it out loud. "If they're looking for a show, my hand is already up. 50 years, I've been waiting for this moment." And he got it. Effective May 22, 2026, the night after Colbert's final broadcast, Byron Allen's show Comics Unleashed took over that slot. But here's the part that makes it genuinely fascinating, because it's not a normal television deal at all. Allen didn't get hired by CBS. Allen is paying CBS. It's a structure called a time buy, where he essentially leases the airtime from the network, and then his own company sells every single advertising spot in those 2 hours and keeps the revenue. He's renting the most famous hour in late night and running his own business inside it. He's said he's putting up tens of millions of dollars to do it, and he's been blunt about the stakes, essentially saying, "This better work." So think about what actually happened here. One of the biggest broadcast networks in America decided that producing original late-night television was no longer profitable, and rather than fill the hour themselves, they sold it to one guy. CBS exited the business. Byron Allen walked in and bought the room. And to understand how a man ends up in a position to do that, you have to go back about 50 years to a teenager standing outside a television studio in Los Angeles. Chapter 2. The 14-year-old who talked his way in. Byron Allen was born in Detroit in 1961, and the single luckiest thing that ever happened to him was that his mother got a job in publicity at NBC. Because that meant a young Byron Allen got to hang around actual television studios as a kid in the 1970s, watching how shows got made, how the business actually worked, who had the power in the room. And he said directly that those years shaped his entire understanding of the industry. Most kids that age are watching TV. He was watching the people who owned TV. And while he was absorbing all of that, he was also doing something genuinely audacious for a kid, performing stand-up comedy at 14 years old. And then the break. A comedian named Jimmy Walker, a huge star at the time from the show Good Times, saw this 14-year-old's act and was impressed enough to bring him onto his comedy writing team. Now, look at who else was on that writing staff. A young Jay Leno and a young David Letterman. So picture that room. A teenager, sitting there writing jokes alongside two men who would go on to host The Tonight Show and The Late Show and define late-night television for 40 years. Half a century later, that same kid would end up buying Letterman's old time slot from CBS. And it got better fast. At 18 years old, Byron Allen performed on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, making him the youngest stand-up comedian ever to appear on that stage. That is the most prestigious platform in comedy, full stop, and he got there before he could legally drink. It led to a regular role on the NBC show Real People, and by his early 20s he was a genuine television personality. But he'd learned something inside those NBC studios that most performers never figure out. That the real money and the real power in television don't belong to the person on camera. They belong to whoever owns the tape. So in the early 90s, he walked away from being talent and started building. Chapter 3. The $300 million bet on the weather. Allen founded his own company, eventually known as Allen Media Group, And the model he built is the whole key to understanding him. Instead of making a show and selling it to a network, he wanted to own the show, own the network it aired on, and sell the advertising inside it, capturing every dollar at every stage. He started by producing syndicated television, court shows, comedy panels, game shows, the unglamorous, low-cost programming that fills the schedule on local stations across America. Nobody writes magazine profiles about that stuff, but it produces something incredibly valuable: a library. Over the years, he accumulated over 5,000 hours of content he owned outright, and by launching his own cable networks, he had somewhere to put it, over and over again, forever. Speaking of what separated Byron Allen from everyone chasing fame in front of the camera, a lot of it comes down to how the brain performs when it matters. That's the idea behind an audio series called the Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the trick that let him expand without spending a dime. And the mechanism he used to grow is genuinely clever, because it required almost no cash. It's called barter syndication, and here's how it works. Instead of selling a show to a local station for money, Allen gives them the show for free, and in exchange, they split the advertising time. The station sells roughly half the ad slots and keeps that money. Allen keeps the other half and sells it nationally. Nobody writes anybody a check. The station fills an hour of its schedule for nothing, and Allen gets his programming onto television screens across the entire country while controlling a national ad inventory he can sell to major brands. It's a quiet, boring, extremely profitable machine, and he was running it for years while the industry barely noticed he existed. And then in 2018, he made the move that changed everything. Byron Allen bought the Weather Channel for a reported $300 million. Now, at the time, plenty of people thought that was a strange purchase. Cable was in decline, cord cutting was accelerating, and here's a guy paying $300 million for a weather network. But watch what he actually bought. The Weather Channel wasn't just a brand. It was a channel that was already sitting in nearly every cable and satellite package in the country, generating steady carriage fees with decades of trust behind the name. It had been voted the most trusted TV news brand in America 8 years running. He didn't buy a TV network. He bought distribution, a permanent seat at the table with every major cable operator in America. And that seat made it dramatically easier to place his other networks and content into those same packages. That single deal transformed him from a syndication guy into a genuine media player. But owning cable channels wasn't enough for him. Next, he went after the physical broadcast stations themselves. Chapter 4. The Billion-Dollar Station Spree. Over the next few years, Byron Allen went on a buying spree that most people never noticed, and it was enormous. He started acquiring local broadcast television stations, the actual ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox affiliates that beam into homes in individual American cities. And he spent over $1 billion doing it. At the peak, Allen Media Group's portfolio reached dozens of local affiliate stations, spread across roughly 21 U.S. markets. Think about what that means. In a couple dozen American cities, the channel showing you the local evening news, the weather, high school football scores, and network primetime was owned by Byron Allen. Not a corporation with a faceless board. Him. And in 2022, he did something that captures his whole philosophy perfectly. The Black News Channel, a cable network that had launched with real ambition to serve Black audiences, collapsed into bankruptcy. Byron Allen bought it out of that bankruptcy for $11 million. $11 million for a network with carriage on Comcast, Charter, Cox, Dish, DirecTV, and Verizon, reaching something like 45 million subscribers. That's the pattern you'll see again and again with this man. When everyone else is running away from an asset, he's walking toward it with a checkbook. He also built a genuinely global operation with licensing deals and programming running in South Africa, the UAE, Australia, Canada, the Bahamas, and New Zealand, plus streaming platforms, a movie distribution arm, and the Griot, his digital media brand aimed at Black audiences. At its high point, Allen Media Group was valued at something north of $4.5 billion. And with all of that under him, Byron Allen decided he was ready to go hunting for the biggest game in American media. What happened next is one of the strangest runs in modern business history. Chapter 5. The $40 billion he bid and didn't win. Here's where the Byron Allen story becomes genuinely wild, because over about 4 years he made a series of offers so enormous they made headlines around the world. And almost none of them landed. Let's run through the list. In 2020, he offered $8.5 billion to buy Tegna, one of the biggest local television station groups in the country. Rejected. In 2022, he joined a bid to buy the Denver Broncos of the NFL. The franchise sold for $4.65 billion to a group led by Walmart heir Rob Walton instead. He also explored a run at the Washington Commanders. In September 2023, he sent Disney CEO Bob Iger an offer, reportedly via text message, of $10 billion for the ABC television network, a batch of local stations, and the FX and National Geographic cable channels. Iger decided he didn't want to sell. That December, Allen bid around $3.5 billion for BET and VH1. Rejected. And then, in January 2024, he swung for the fences. Allen Media Group and its partners submitted a bid for all of Paramount Global, the parent company of CBS, MTV, Nickelodeon, and Paramount Pictures. The offer was roughly $14.3 billion for the shares, and with the assumption of the company's debt, the total value came to around $30 billion. He was trying to buy one of the great American media conglomerates outright. It didn't happen. Bloomberg tallied his wish list at over $40 billion in attempted acquisitions, with very few completed deals to show for it. And here's my favorite part because it tells you everything about his psychology. When CNBC pressed him about his record of failed bids, Allen didn't get defensive. He reached for a baseball analogy. He said, "Let's talk about Babe Ruth. Does he go down as one of the greatest of all time?" And he struck out half the time. Now, CNBC couldn't resist pointing out that Babe Ruth's actual strikeout rate was about 15%, not half. But the mindset is the point. This is a man completely comfortable swinging in public and missing in public because he understands something his critics don't. You only have to connect once. And there's another weapon in his arsenal that most media executives don't have. He sues. Back in 2014, Allen filed suit against AT&T, alleging the company racially discriminated against his firm by refusing to carry his channels. That case settled in 2015, and as part of it, he walked away with carriage for 7 cable channels. He later sued Comcast for $20 billion on similar grounds, in a case that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And he sued McDonald's for $100 million over how little of its enormous advertising budget went to Black-owned media. That one settled in 2025, with McDonald's agreeing to buy advertising time from his companies at market value. Whatever you think of that approach, it's undeniably effective. He has repeatedly converted lawsuits into distribution and revenue, which is not a business strategy they teach anywhere. So by 2026, here's the picture. A man with a genuine empire, a reputation for enormous public swings, and a long list of misses. And then, in a single month, he connected twice. Chapter 6. Buying BuzzFeed for pennies. In March of 2026, BuzzFeed, the company that basically invented viral internet content, the home of the quizzes and the listicles and HuffPost, told its investors something terrifying. In the language of accounting, the company said there was substantial doubt about its ability to continue as a going concern. That's the formal phrase businesses use when they're staring down the possibility of not surviving. The numbers were brutal. BuzzFeed had once been valued at $1.7 billion back in 2016, when NBC Universal was pouring hundreds of millions into it. By May of 2026, its entire market capitalization had collapsed to around $31 million. Its stock was trading under $1, and it had been warned it might get delisted from the Nasdaq. For the full year 2025, it posted a net loss of over $57 million. Without a buyer, reporting suggested the company would likely have been forced into bankruptcy. So Byron Allen picked up the phone. He called BuzzFeed's founder Jonah Peretti right after that going concern warning, took him to lunch and said, "Look, let's do it. Let's get it done." And on May 27, 2026, the deal closed. Allen's family office paid $120 million for roughly 51% of BuzzFeed, and Byron Allen became chairman and chief executive officer of the company. Peretti, the founder, moved into a newly created role running BuzzFeed's AI division. And look at how he structured it, because this is the shrewd part. Of that $120 million, only $20 million was actual cash at closing. The other $100 million was a promissory note due in 5 years at 5% interest. He took control of an iconic internet company plus HuffPost for $20 million down. And that wasn't even his only move that spring. In March of 2026, Allen picked up a stake of nearly 11% in Starz, the premium cable network, for around $25 million. So inside of about 90 days, this man leased the most famous block in late-night television, bought a chunk of a premium cable network, and took majority control of one of the most recognizable digital media brands on the internet. After years of headlines about the giant deals he didn't get, Byron Allen suddenly closed 3 in a single quarter. His stated plan for BuzzFeed and HuffPost is to push both into free streaming video, audio, and user-generated content, plus a heavy bet on AI. But while he was making these headline-grabbing moves, something much less flattering was happening to the empire underneath him. Chapter 7. The Other Side of the Ledger. Now for the honest part, because a video that only shows you the winning bids would be lying to you about what's actually going on. While Byron Allen was buying BuzzFeed and leasing CBS's Late Night, his core broadcast business was going the other direction. In June of 2025, Allen Media Group hired an investment bank to explore selling its television stations, the ones he'd spent over $1 billion assembling, specifically to reduce the company's debt. And the numbers reflected. From a peak of dozens of stations across roughly 21 markets, recent reporting puts his portfolio at around 13 network affiliate stations in about 11 markets. That's a significant contraction. So the title, "Buying Up American Television," is only half the picture. He's been selling pieces of it too, to keep the balance sheet manageable. And the way he's run those stations has drawn genuine criticism. In one widely reported move, Allen Media gutted the weather departments at around 24 of its local affiliates, with plans to lay off roughly 50 meteorologists and centralize forecasting through larger stations and the Weather Channel. For local viewers, that meant the person telling you whether a tornado was coming might be sitting in another state. The backlash was strong enough that the plan got scaled back. There were also reports in 2024 of his company drawing real frustration from ABC, CBS, and NBC over late payments on the fees he owed them as an affiliate. Not a great look for a man simultaneously bidding $30 billion for Paramount. And look at how the BuzzFeed deal was actually financed, because it fits the same pattern. $20 million in cash and a $100 million IOU. That's not a man writing checks from a mountain of spare cash. That's a man using leverage, structure, and timing to punch far above his weight. It's genuinely impressive financial engineering. And it's also exactly the kind of thing that works spectacularly until the moment it doesn't. So both things are true at once. Byron Allen is a genuinely brilliant operator who has forced open doors that were closed to Black owners in an industry that had almost none. And he's also a heavily leveraged buyer under real financial pressure, selling assets on one side of the ledger while making splashy acquisitions on the other. Which brings us to the strategy underneath all of it. And once you see it, everything clicks. Chapter 8. The Man Who Buys What Everyone Else is Running From. Here's the pattern, and it's the whole thesis of Byron Allen's career. He doesn't buy things when they're hot. He buys them when everybody else has given up on them. Look at the entire list again through that lens. The Weather Channel, a cable network in a cord-cutting apocalypse. He bought it. The Black News Channel, literally in bankruptcy, he bought it for $11 million. CBS's Late Night block, a business the network itself publicly declared unprofitable and walked away from. He leased it. BuzzFeed. Weeks from potential bankruptcy, market cap collapsed to $31 million, stock under $1. He took majority control for $20 million in cash. Even his 11% stake in Stars, picked up for around $25 million in 2026, follows the same logic. This man is a distressed asset buyer operating in an industry that spent the last decade in a controlled demolition. Everyone else sees traditional media dying. Byron Allen sees a clearance sale. And the bet underneath it is genuinely interesting. All those legacy assets still have things the new media world struggles to buy: existing distribution into millions of homes, decades of brand trust, and libraries of content. He's calculating that these things have been oversold and undervalued, that the funeral for old media is premature, and if you can buy the pieces cheap enough and stack them together, the math works even in a shrinking market. He might be completely right. He might be catching a falling knife. Nobody knows yet. But step back and look at the whole run. A 14-year-old from Detroit talks his way onto a comedy writing staff next to Jay Leno and David Letterman. At 18, he becomes the youngest comedian ever to stand on Johnny Carson's stage. Then he quits performing because he figured out that the guy holding the microphone never gets rich. The guy who owns the tape does. 50 years later, he's worth somewhere between $700 million and $1 billion. He owns the Weather Channel. He's the CEO of BuzzFeed. And he's running his own show in the time slot where Letterman used to sit. He has swung and missed at $40 billion worth of American media. He just keeps swinging. And in an industry where almost nobody who looks like him has ever owned anything at all, that stubbornness might be the single most valuable asset he has. If stories about how the biggest names turn fame into empires they actually own are what brought you here, subscribe to Black Status and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.